Welcome back, guys. Time for new lecture from Black's point of view against extremely annoying and the one that you hate so much, Rossolimo variation. It's bishop b5 by Black. It's for those who play from modern moves for Black e4, c5, knight f3, knight c6, and when they play bishop b5. It's called dynamic and aggressive Rossolimo variation. Third move g5. And this is a sharp and uncommon sideline of Rossolimo, and Black's move g5 is very unusual, aggressive attempt to attack White's knight on f3 with g4, consequently to go with knight e4, going after the bishop on b5, and then h5 to open up the king's side. However, it weakens the king's side basically in the pawn structure, and is generally considered a risky by dynamic approach. Its main representatives are who else but Magnus Carlsen, whose game we're about to check. Then Matthew Sadler, strong, unorthodox and the very original GM from England who enjoys not only computer chess but also positions with lots of sacrifices, lots of unusual approaches, and I really have to say that I felt on my own skin his strength because he defeated me twice. I played with White bishop b5 twice against knight c6. He went twice for g5 and killed me in both games. And there is a GM from Croatia, Alojzije Jankovic, who also applies this with lots of success, and some guy Lamparthi from India, whose results are also very strong. We're about to check all these games. We're about to check mostly ideas because it's very difficult in such variations to give you like very concrete stuff. So let's go. G5. I would like to begin with probably the worst of all the moves. If White doesn't react at all and says, okay, I don't know what's happening here. I don't know what's the point of G5. I just understand that you want to probably of me to take on G5. So let me just make castle. Well, believe it or not, this fairly, I would say passive, I would call it passive approach, works really well for Black. So how do we play? We kick the knight away with G4, which is basically one of the main ideas and approaches behind G5. Then H5, because we're defending, but not only defending pawn on G4, we also want to carry on pushing these pawns with H4 and G3, or maybe H4 and H3. C3 makes lots of sense. If you remember my video for Black in one of Sicilian's e4, c5, knight f3, h6 here in the channel, I told you that the only variation for White to face that h6, believe it or not, it's not even that bad, should be c3. Also against O'Kelly variation, e4, c5, knight f3, a6, c3 is considered to be the best. And here you once again have c3, which goes for the center. They just want to play d4. They want to get like a strong control of the center and strong pawns being there maintained in the center. So it's time to check what to do. Bishop g7. Now you can't push d4. That's the point. And when they play bishop c6, you would just take by d pawn and have the bishop pair, and they wouldn't be able to play d4 either. So d3, and then you go queen c7. It's a very nice hidden move, which in some ways stops this one. Maybe you're just controlling queen c6, but I would rather take by d pawn, going for the open d file, and I would just like to have an open light square bishop this way. So after f3, knight f6, knight d2, d5. If you ask me, engine here, for example, says play a6 and recapture by queen on c6. Okay, but I don't see anything wrong with developing my light square bishop to e6 and playing along castle, playing along the d file. That's it about castle. So we've just seen how to treat positions if they don't react at all and pretend like nothing's happening. One of my games against Sadler went for h3. And I just tried to stop his initial idea with g4, and it didn't work well. So let me just show you how in 10 moves I got a lost position with white pieces. Okay, those were bullet games, but still, we're experienced players, know lots of, like setups for white and black, and no one should be lost in 10 moves against any opening. So I played h3. Matthew Sadler played knight f6. If you're, like on for like more solid setups, then black should be going with h6. And after c3, once again with the same approach, d5. Now it's some sort of reminiscent of Alpine Sicilian defense. Queen takes d5, knight a3, bishop g7, castles, and once again you're trying to take advantage of this g4. After knight c4, h5, queen d6, now you're happy if they take on g4 because the h file would be ours and the mate is inevitable. d4 long castle. Believe me, I only see a lots of attacking approaches and ideas by black in this type of game, especially because they cannot do anything with the pinned knight on f3, and they can never capture that bishop on g4 because we just recapture h6, g4 and go after the mate on h2. So I didn't play, Sadler didn't play h6, and he went for knight f6. Knight f6 goes after the pawn on e4. It's a relatively interesting thing. And I said, what the hell? I mean, I don't get it. I'm just gonna go with nothing else but the most logical thing, e5. You know what? If I played, for example, knight c3, I assumed that he would go with g4, took here by knight, played like this, and then play rook g8. And this is exactly what black players want from this position. They want like complete chaos, an active game of pieces, and somehow I see positions all the time here to be with neutral chances. In the game was e5. That's what I played, and I consider e5 being the most logical move. And you gotta be honest, most of you would also play this. And then came out of nowhere. Boom! g4. I get confused. Now I realized if I take on g4, he would just capture on g4, and then e5 turns out to be weak, and he can easily take advantage of my pawn because now g7 is open, and this is so nice. So I said, okay, let me just take it. He captured, and believe it or not, black is already good. Black is already good. I played queen to f3. He played knight to d4, threatening my bishop and the queen. I played queen to d3, which is the only move to save the piece. He played a6, and boom, after d5, he was completely winning. So in 10 moves, with the white pieces, in a bullet game, I was dead lost against seemingly such a dubious opening by black. Third move, g5. Very nice. Lovely end. By the way, once again, this was a bullet game played on League Chess 2025 against GM from England, Matthew Sadler. Unfortunately, I was white. Okay, I just showed you what happens after h3. Then there is a third line, bishop c6. Here we're about to see a real, like beauty. Magnus Carlsen was black against a woman, I believe, FM Preobrazhenskaya. A beautiful game, and get ready for something really, really exciting. Magnus captured by d-pawn. He's opening up the bishop, and he says, okay, I'm fine with development like this. White captured the pawn, and Magnus plays knight f6 like nothing's happening. For the first time, you get an option of playing rook g8 and going for the knight and the pawn on g2. In many lines, turns out that black definitely wants to get that, to play rook g8, to take by rook on g2, and according to engines, you will realize that all these positions are usually very suspicious for black. But if you try them out in the practice, if you analyze them a little bit, if you, I don't know, play some training games against your friends or just use it online, you'll see that more difficulties white players have than black. So here, his opponent played d3. But I was just interested to see what would happen, for example, if white played e5. A very interesting line I came up with. The rook g8, threatening the knight and the pawn on g2. And usually this e5 move should be faced either with rook g8 or g4 when it's possible. d3, defending the knight. But you still go with h6. You still fight and force them to take on f6. E takes, h takes queen e7. And now don't exchange the queens because, yes, you're down a pawn, but you enjoy the bishop pair and the nice activity of your pieces. After knight c3, long castles, bishop e3, bishop g7. I'd like to stop here. Bishop pair, much better development. No other structural weaknesses. Lots of possibilities to go with the attack if they make short castle. Lots of kingside possibilities to use the activity of these bishops. Even inability by white to play any d4 or f4 afterwards. I see this, okay, position is, I would say, with mutual chances on both sides, but actually I'd say that I'd rather be black here. Preobrazhenskaya played against Magnus d3. Magnus played rook g8. He's getting ready for h6 and to get a pawn back. And now she says, okay, let me just castle and I grab the pawn, so I'm fine. And this is like a real thing. And once again, I'm going to come up with what Engine says here. Engine, in these positions, prefer white. But it's not a big advantage. It's one of those advantages based on probably material assessment by engines. And by the way, engines know how, actually, they don't have feelings, and they know how to defend. They don't care whether they play against Magnus Carlsen or biggest patzers in the world. They just play the top moves all the time. When you play against humans, human starts sweating, like king is here, he threatens bishop h3, what am I going to do with the queen d7, and so on. And all of a sudden, all your opponents will feel very uncomfortable. And that's what you have to play on if you ever decide to play g5 against Rossolimo. Bishop g4, what's the point behind bishop g4? You want to go after the knight, fighting against both weak king and pinned queen. Okay, king h1, well, almost everyone would go with this move and makes so much sense. And now Magnus plays c4. His idea behind c4 was to undouble these pawns, to open up the game further for his bishops, to open the d file, and for example, if this, Magnus can take on d1 and take on e4, threatening here, and threatening bishop f3 as well, because no more king g1, or even playing some knight e4 immediately with all the pieces on the board. Of course, queen d1, in my opinion, would just be better. So after c4, his opponent played knight c3. Magnus plays queen c7. He doesn't care about the pawns. He just cares about the activity of his pieces. h3, bishop h5. Now, no g4 should work because, of course, Magnus would sack the piece and carry on with almost undefendable mating attack. So d takes c4, and Magnus plays knight d7. A beautiful move. He's unable to make a long castle because of the queen on d1. He doesn't want to place rook d8, even though it would be a pretty good move. Probably the best one after knight d7. But he plays a beautiful move, knight d7. With knight d7, he's killing a couple of birds with one stone. First of all, he can play long castle. Second thing, he can play knight e5, going after the knight on f3. And finally, he just has a safer king on c8 after all. So after queen d3, long castles, he now wants to go with knight e5, queen e3, Magnus plays e5. All of a sudden, he realized that he shouldn't go anymore because his opponent unpinned herself, and he couldn't play any more knight e5, but now he goes with bishop c5. She played a3, he immediately takes, and now he says, okay, she wants to play some b4. She probably wants to somehow unpin herself. Ideally, most of us would go with this, but Magnus is... That's why he's the best player in the history of chess. He plays bishop d4, getting the c5 outpost. So after like bishop e3, boom, f5. Out of nowhere, he's not hesitating. After e takes f5, Magnus captured, play d4. And let me just show you the finish of the game. Of course, he could have captured here on f3 and finished her off, but he first played rook g2, bishop f3, and it was checkmate. Beautiful game, lovely, exploitation of this g5 move and all the ideas there. And just like you see, these bishop c6 ideas don't seem to work really well there. Then another line. Another line was another game of myself against Matthew Sadler. This time I played once again originally not that bad as the first one, and this one I even got a better position, but eventually in mutual complications, since those were bullet games, I lost. I played knight c3. He played g4, which is anyways his main idea. Knight e4, which is another type of his idea. Probably here you can play queen g4 not only because of knight c2 check-in, where you lose the rook, but even knight b5 followed by d5. So I played knight g2, Sadler played knight f6, and he always has some creative ways of facing my e5. I played e5, he captured on b5, played knight e5, I played knight bc3, captured by d pawn, and just like you see, I had a relatively nice position. Fun fact, no matter if I was white in this game, if I played way better than the first game, if I played most of these normal moves and played lots of, I would call them developing logical moves, still, black absolutely has playable game, and according to top stuff and engines, this is not even better for white. Once again, interesting, probably a little bit exposed pawn on e5, bishop pair for black, a little bit advanced pawns, and probably an ability to make short castle. That makes this position being very, very playable for black. And finally, if after g5, they take on g5. This is the last thing that I want to show you here, and it's very important to show you a game. I played 2 bullet games by myself against this knight g5. I was black. I won both in a really, really nice style. Let me just show you what happened there. So you play developing move, knight f6. Here, no bishop c6 should work because we just want to go like Magnus against Preobrazhenskaya. It actually transpose, and it's just like Carlsen's game. Apart from knight c3, rook g8, d3, h6, we get this pawn back, and these positions are supposed to be positions with lots of compensation. Apart from taking, you can also play knight e4 because they can't take and go with the knight because you just win the bishop. So they just have to go with bishop c4, and then you play rook g2, which is another very interesting and quite tempting variation for black. After knight f6, white goes with d3. White goes with d3, defending pawn on e4, and defending knight on g5. I'm showing you game. This was an over the board tournament game from Dubai Open 2025. Emre Can, strong Turkish GM, almost 2600 was white. Lamparti, GM from India, 2500 was black. But this guy with black pieces, this guy Lamparti, has very, very creative way of trading this opening, and that's why I chose this line. Enjoy the game. Knight e4, threatening the bishop, bishop c4, and boom. You're just opening up everything, fighting against the bishop on c4. They have to take, and boom, you're now fighting against the bishop on c4 again. Bishop e3, boom, you're placing the rook on g8 and getting a full compensation. Time for my games. Finally, I was talking about my Patzerish games against Matthew Sadler and how I actually got outplayed both times I faced this line. And let me now show you how I created this system when my opponents in this position played short castle. The game between Emre Can and Lamparti went with c3, but a little bit more about this game later. After castle, I made an improvement here. And this is my improvement over 2 blitz games. So queen d7. And after king h1, h6. And after knight f3, rook g2. It's very common. It's very common to go with this kind of a thing. They don't have time to take on g2 because you just play queen g4 and you mate them. And if they play like knight f3, I mean, do I have to show you that you have zillions of ways to finish off your opponent, including queen h3, knight f3, and knight g4. Very, very lovely thing. And this queen d7 gives you h6 followed by rook g2 threats. I am not sure, according to the engines, what should be the best for white to defend. I'm pretty sure that if you run the engines, it's not lost. But I'm also sure if humans have to play this position, they are just going to have like tremendous problems to defend this game. c3. If knight c3, they overprotect the pawn on d5. You just go with h6. You just grab the pawn, and when they take, you take by e pawn. Giving yourself possibility to go with bishop g4, with the rook on g2, without a possibility for them to put the king in safety, to threaten bishop g4, I believe this is a real thing. One more thing. If h3, a very lovely trick with bishop h3. You can take because of rook g1. So if they take, you just go rook g1. Sorry, I meant this one. Rook here, you play rook g1 and win the queen. If they go with bishop f4, you play bishop g4, queen c1, and boom, king d7. What a nice and original way of fighting for initiative. Then you want to place your rook on e8 or queen e7 followed by rook e8. A very nice thing, a very unusual position, and once again, in such an original way, Black is just getting what he wanted from the really beginning when he played the third move g5. He's got a game full of possibilities, lots of tactics, and can rely on some tricky things here. Let's get back to Emre Can game once again. Tournament game, Dubai Open 2025. White player is 2600, black player is 2500 GM. c3, black captured and played queen d5. It's very interesting. I apologize. That already in this position, black has slightly better game because of the bishop pair, because of better development of his pieces, because of g-file open, and possibility to play active with his bishops. In case of castle, you just play bishop h6, take, and go with knight f4. g4, g2 is about to drop, as well as pawn on d3, knight e2 fork is threatened, so this is completely lost. They have to play knight e4, and Lamparty took on g2. This guy played a4. Lamparty once again plays very active and aggressive c4 move. A takes b5 captures, and probably Emre Can thought that he would completely solidify his game with knight bd2, but now comes out of nowhere. Boom! Knight to e3. What a spectacular tactical thing. And you don't even have one piece developed apart from the rook on g2. Who would say it works? You can easily fall in asleep during the game thinking that they're nothing for black, but actually this tactics shows in its most beautiful fashion. What's the point? If f takes e3, check. If king f1, check. This one, check. And then you go for the windmill or for some discoveries and you're winning. If king d1, you just have bishop g4, and it's completely lost because once again we threaten to go with the discovery. In some lines, even mates. Emre Can played h4. He played h4, so you wouldn't be able to give him bishop h3 once he takes. Lamparty came up with this. Now he wants to go with this rook, and once again there is inability by black to play bishop g6. Sorry, bishop h3. He plays rook g6. Rook is threatened, and rook a4. Now he plays bishop b7, threatening f5 to win the knight or the rook, playing long castle, supporting the passed pawn, and playing bishop h6, threatening bishop e3 check. After knight c1, he exchanged, played bishop e4, played rook f6, played rook g8, and came up with this mating net. This was a beautiful game, and when I prepared for this lecture to present you these ideas about dynamic aggressive g5, this was absolutely the most beautiful game, especially because it was played between two GMs, approximately 2600 both, and it was, you know what, this wasn't a blitz or bullet game, this was a real game. Anyways, hope that you enjoyed in the presentation of new modern g5 dynamic approach by black. Hopefully you're gonna have lots of nice games with it, and you just have to contact me and to tell me if you have the same experience like Magnus Carlsen, Matthew Sadler, and other GMs here. Enjoy your time and see you soon.